Okay, perfect. All right, well, as I mentioned, my name is Tony Nelson. I am a sales engineer here at TerraSky, and with me I have Jeremy Hepikoski as well. He's an account executive, and we're going to be talking through how to customize Lightning, as this is a pretty hot topic for a lot of people in the Salesforce space, just over the next probably the next several years, really. This is going to be an active topic that you'll see pop up more and more as Salesforce releases iterations of the next generation kind of UI and customizability to the platform. So very exciting topic. Now, what we're going to be covering today is this agenda here. It's a brief discussion about what is Lightning, why should you care about it, and then we're going to go into an active component creation of a completely customized component, and then leave about a third of the time open for Q&A, as there's quite a few of you on this webinar, and I want to make sure that we can address as many of your questions as possible. I see lots of partners, lots of customers, some Salesforce staff, so we've got a full mixture of people in here, and I want to make sure that we're able to get to as many questions as possible to help kind of guide and direct people that may have questions about Lightning. All right, so let's just kick this off. What is Lightning and why should you care about it? Well, for those of you who have had a customized environment, you probably have used Visualforce in the past to get that done, or maybe some kind of JavaScript and HTML pages to create a truly customized environment. And Salesforce has created sort of this next generation method of designing UIs within Salesforce, and that's referred to as the Lightning framework, or the Aura framework if you're more on the development side. And it's just going to be the new method around which pretty much everything in the platform moving forward is going to be built. So if you haven't seen the Lightning experience yet, I'll show it to you in just a couple of moments so you can see the drastic change from Salesforce Classic to Lightning. It is a huge shift in terms of the way things are designed, how they're architected, how they're created from a user experience perspective, as well as let me see here. We've got, it would help if I shared my screen, wouldn't it? Yes, thank you for pointing that out. So, so here's the webinar. My apologies for that. So this is kind of the agenda for this. Thank you for pointing that out. Now, as I said, we're going to go through actually showing what the Lightning environment looks like. We're going to talk through some of the customization pain points that a lot of people have had, and then we're actually going to, like I said, build out a component. We're going to use the SuPICE platform. It's an app exchange package that TerraSky designed just for the speed of things. So if you have done any kind of custom development, if you could, just go ahead and I guess I'll just do another quick question and kind of watch the questions panel as you begin to answer this, but what is everyone's level of comfort with code? Are you developers? Are you more system administrators? How comfortable do you all feel with diving into code? Is that something you've had to do at your current company so far? Okay, so I see several of you are developers, some of you are configuration only. So we've got a full mix of things. And what we're going to be kind of looking at is, for the sake of brevity, we're going to be looking at a tooling to just kind of build things quickly. But for those of you who are developers, obviously you'll want to talk about some of the more technical aspects, so we'll dive into that. But so why you should care about Lightning? Like I said, it's sort of the default thing that's going to be happening to Salesforce moving forward. So if your company has not actively been evaluating Salesforce Lightning, I see that about 30% of the people that actually filled out the poll said they're not currently evaluating Lightning in any way, shape, or form. If you're in that category and not actively looking at it yet, this is a really good time in Salesforce's history to be in the ecosystem. You're kind of on the precipice of some major changes that are coming down, and you have a brief sneak peek chance now, if not several times in the past, to get around a bunch of other companies that are all trying to figure out how to make use of this new technology and framework. So it's a great time to plug into user groups if you're not already plugged in, and just get some ideas from people around how they're using it, because this is going to be a pretty big game changer in terms of how we begin to interact with this next generation of UI creation. So let's kind of dive into what am I actually talking about when I say it's sort of the next gen thing. So in here, let me switch over to this tab. This is what sort of the new Lightning UI looks like. So if you've never seen it before, this is sort of what it's going to look like for you. Salesforce has had, I guess this is the second release where Lightning has really been kind of mainstreamed and publicly available, but this has really been the first release that they've had Lightning where I've begun to take it seriously. Not that it wasn't something that TerraSky was seriously evaluating ever since, years ago whenever we first heard about it and began development with Salesforce, but this is the first kind of release back in spring of 2016, so I think that was start of February, where they began to open up enough features of Lightning so that it was actually usable by some companies. For me, the big roadblock to Lightning was the fact that you couldn't customize the desktop environment, and I know that's a huge roadblock for a lot of people. So now that that's available, I felt it was a good time to bring this back up and let's start looking at how do we actually use this within our desktop environments. So here is a custom page that we have built out in the Lightning experience so far. It's for a lead record, and I've pretty much replicated the basic UI inside of the app builder. But if you'll notice, I have this component called a to-do list. Now this to-do list is a custom Lightning component that I've built just to kind of show you some of the fluid interactions that you can get with the new UI framework that maybe wasn't necessarily available, at least not very easily, in the old Salesforce Classic UI. So here's a traditional to-do list where if I wanted to go find something, let's say it was a follow-up task that I had with a customer, so we'll say the very last item in this list. First thing I should point out is the dynamic nature of the searching. So I'm sure everybody just saw that, where I began to type the word follow and it began to dynamically search for content within Salesforce. So that's a big change. That didn't happen in Salesforce Classic. So there's a lot of these kind of streamlined user experiences that we're going to get with Lightning that you just don't get in the old UI. But then the ability to incorporate a lot of what we're seeing within the touch environment. So since everything is going to be touch enabled for smartphones, for tablets, and then now for desktops, we can really begin to take advantage of some of the cool swipe technology and pull down features to refresh things that you get in sort of a mobile experience, and now we can begin to design that for desktop. And you may be wondering, why in the world would I want that for desktop? Well, maybe this is just the technologist in me and kind of seeing where the future of technology is going. Eventually, your monitors that are not currently touchscreens will be touchscreen monitors. It's just going to be the way of the future. So if you don't yet have touchscreen monitors on your laptops and desktop, that's all right. It's coming. It'll eventually be the norm. But until then, this is going to be maybe a feature that you'll less commonly use, but it might be something that people on your mobile environment use all the time. So just be aware, and what I'm talking about is in this particular to-do list, what I'm going to do is I'm going to select the follow-up with customer record, and then I'm going to swipe it to the right. And if you notice, I'm actually able to do kind of like a swipe motion. I'm on a touch screen at the moment. So if I swipe to the right, if you notice at the top, there's a banner across the top that says the record has now been saved. And if you look right below, the in progress has now been updated to the record, the follow-up task has been completed. So it's just a real quick way to kind of handle some of the new functionality that's in there with the swipe technology. And then you have the capability, of course, of selecting a record and drilling into it and working with the record as needed. So just a quick glimpse of kind of what's possible with Lightning. What we'll do now is actually go into how do you build out a Lightning component? What does that look like? We're not going to have nearly enough time to dive into the actual Lightning component bundles. I wrote a blog on the Lightning bundle and Visualforce pages and kind of the differences between the two because there's a significant difference from a development perspective between the two. So if you're curious about actually peeling apart the layers of what a Lightning bundle actually looks like, you can go check out that blog post and we'll do a deeper dive. But we just unfortunately won't have time to go really deep in the code or anything like that on this webinar. Maybe a future webinar we'll do one like that. So what we'll do instead is, let me kind of pull up the studio here. So this is the SuPICE studio. Basically, it is a component building environment. So instead of having to build a Lightning component bundle from scratch and creating all the assets and resources yourself and having to worry about how the different events interact with each other, you're able to just kind of drag and drop and configure some of that, and then we generate the bundle for you, And if you wanted to, you can go in and hack away and modify all of the code inside of the bundle. So full control over that from a development perspective, but this is just here to kind of streamline some of that. So one of the things that we found is that since Salesforce has created this whole Lightning experience, they also built the Lightning App Builder, which has been a fantastic resource for administrators who are maybe configuration only to get some of the stuff that us developers are building and put it into their hands, and now they can begin configuring and designing their own custom UIs. So that's been really slick. Where SuPICE comes into play is there needs to be more stuff on the App Exchange. There needs to be more things that the admins can use to actually create the pages, and this is going to be one of the platforms that you can use to actually get that done. So that's just kind of where this fits into the whole thing, and we'll show actually building one, deploying one, and then using it within the App Builder. Now what I'm going to create today is something fairly basic and rudimentary, but it is just going to be an example of sort of the design structure that Lightning has that you kind of need to wrap your mind around if you haven't done development work with it. It's going to be more event-based, and the components are more reactive to the user. If you've used Visualforce in the past, I don't see tab in your list. To be more specific around the kind of interactions that you might have had with Visualforce, you had the entire kind of page that was customized, and when you did an interaction with Visualforce, the entire page had to respond to whatever you did. So if you clicked a button, the entire page had to perform some kind of action, and it was really clunky in terms of what we expect from a modern application. Whereas with Lightning, each and every single Lightning component is a standalone component, so it can react independently of whatever else you're doing inside of the Lightning experience. So this allows us to create a really fluid kind of interactive environment. So you saw in the to-do list when I was searching, the entire page wasn't refreshing every time I did it. It was just that one component that kept refreshing to determine if the new results were shown. So that's just an example of some of the new kind of fluid motions that we can expect to see within the Salesforce environment. Now what I'm going to do is create a new component, so a new project, if you will. So we'll call this, let's say, my webinar component. You can call it whatever you'd like, and it's going to ask for a theme. This is just a cosmetic styling theme. I'm not going to select one right now, and we'll go ahead and create that project. So the first thing that we're going to do is make a component that will allow the user to, let's say, add a search box onto a page, and then as they begin searching, instead of dynamically searching, I want them to be able to click a button and then it search for content across multiple objects. So kind of the use case I'm thinking of is, let's say that you want to search for a name. Well, what if that name is a lead record, or what if it's a contact, or what if it's the name of an opportunity or an account, and you just want to be able to type in one spot and have it find information across multiple objects? That's the kind of thing we're going to create today. So let's start with a header. So we're going to just name the component so it's very obvious what we're building. The first thing we do is we would just drag that unit onto the canvas called the header, and the right-hand side is going to be an interactive and working preview of what we're going to see inside of the Lightning App Builder and when it's fully deployed into Salesforce. So on the right-hand side, if we look at that, it currently says header and it kind of looks gray and monotone in color. So I'm going to click the gear icon and we're going to change this up. First thing I'm going to do is delete the label, and as you notice on the right-hand side, the header text goes away. So here I'm going to type my webinar component. Oh, if I can type correctly, there we go. And now that I've opened the property window, you notice there are a couple of tabs across the top. This middle one is a styling brush. It's for cosmetic changes. So if you're a developer, you can come in, utilize some basic functional CSS stuff, and if you need to get deeper into CSS styling, I would recommend using third-party CSS style sheets that you then associate to the component. So that, anyway, that's a little bit deeper than we need to go into in this webinar, but let's just say for the sake of this, what I'm going to do is select a background color that's maybe, let's say, a darker blue in color, and we'll do maybe something like that. And for the color of the text, we're just going to select a white. For font weight, we'll make the text bold, and maybe make this a size 24 in terms of the text size. So as you can see, you get a working preview of what we're going to be doing on the right-hand side. So it just allows us to style and create things just like we need them really quick, get a working preview of it, and then move on to the next portion of the component. The next thing that I want to do is utilize a box of some kind to capture the user input. So if you notice, we have several components on the left-hand side that are blue. These are sort of generic data entry things. It could be checkboxes or radio buttons or whatever you need. We're going to use a text box for a time being. And if you notice on the right-hand side, you get kind of a generic text box entry that you would expect on a form or on some kind of mobile device, something like that. So we're going to click the gear, and for the placeholder text, we'll say type here, ... And I'm going to change the label of this to just say name, just so that the user knows that we're going to type the name of something in this text box area, and then it's going to have something happen. But if you notice, there's this little box tab at the top. This happens for any of the configuration components that are kind of generic. This allows us to switch from maybe an input of a text box to maybe a date picker, as an example. And you can see those changes on the right-hand side. We're going to leave it as a text box for now, but that's just to give you an idea of what it is. The next thing that we need to put on is the button we're going to interact with. Once the user's done typing, they need to be able to click a button that says search. So I'm going to drag a button onto the canvas and drop it on. Now the text on the right-hand side says button. That's not helpful, so I want to give it something a little more intuitive for a user to understand, and I'll just type the word search. It could be click to search or something like that. You type whatever you want, but this will be what happens. Now Lightning, like I said, is an event-driven system, so when the button is clicked, right now nothing happens. We haven't told the component what to do when a button is clicked. We will get into the interactions in just a moment. The next thing we need to do is actually display some data. So I'm going to take a list view, but it could be an accordion or really anything you'd like. We'll do an accordion, why not? So for the accordion, when I drag it on, notice that nothing appeared on the right-hand side. Well, if I expand this, there is now a third, or I guess it looks sort of like 3 disks that are stacked on top of each other. This list of information needs to access an object within Salesforce and then pull some fields in to display them. So this is going to be where you actually build your data source for this component. So let me drag this up here so it's a little more visible. What we're going to do is select the lead object in here. So I'll just choose lead. And then it's going to display all of the fields that are available for us to work with. And there are 2 portions of an accordion. So an accordion is kind of like if you've ever used a mobile environment where you click on a header and it kind of expands and you can see some additional content once you've expanded that. That's called an accordion, and that's what we're going to be creating today. So what should be the header when the accordion is collapsed? What goes there that we're going to be displaying? Here, let's just say it's the lead full name. So I can click the full name and add that to the header. And if you notice on the right-hand side, we now begin to see full name. Let's say maybe for some of the content on the inside, we want to see something like phone number. So I can begin to filter and find the phone number. Maybe I want the title of the person and maybe their email address, something like that. So we can do email address as other content inside. And let's also say that we want to know not just the person's name, but also the company that they're at. We want to see that in the header portion of the accordion as well. Well, how do we know that the content actually exists? On the right-hand side, if we change from layout to interaction, I can actually expand and collapse the accordions to see what this would look like when the user's interacting with it when it's deployed. So a really quick way just to test the component without having to actually deploy the code. Well, once we've done that, in order to take the information from the text box and then filter it based on the content in this search list, what I need to do is tell it how we're going to use the content from the search box. Let me drag this up so that when I click the filter right here, click the little add filter, it's going to bring up what kind of information we're going to filter this list of leads based on. Because currently it'll just pull the entire list of leads from Salesforce. So how are we going to filter this? Well, what I would like to do is I would like to say that I want to filter based on the full name. And if the full name happens to contain any of the information that the user types in that text area, then I want that to be the filter criteria for this list. So here, I can specify to have fixed text, or I can specify to have some unit that we're filtering on. So I'm going to specify a unit and then select the text box. So once I've done this, we now have set up kind of the basic logic for how a criteria should be set up. Once we're done with this, we can go ahead and click Done. And really we can begin deploying and testing the component. But the search button itself still has not been configured. We've said once the user is typing some information in the text field, we need to filter the content, but we still need to get the interaction in place. So now what we're going to do is click the button, and we're going to tell it how the user is going to interact with the button itself. So we go to the little lightning tab, and this is where we define the interactions for a component. Most of the components will have some kind of interactivity that you can do with it. In this particular case, what I want to do is add an interaction, and here I'll say search lead list, just to be very descriptive. And in this case, the button just has a touch event. There's no need for a swipe action or something like that on the button, at least not yet. And within the action panel, there's several things you can do. In this particular case, what I'm going to do is simply refresh the list every time a user clicks the search button. So they're going to type some information in and click search, and it will refresh the list with the newly filtered content. So that's what we're going to be creating. And then it's going to ask us what unit on the canvas should we refresh. And so here is where we choose the accordion list. Now, whenever you start to build actual components that are more complex, you're going to want to leave a naming convention that makes sense for when you have a lot of these components on the canvas. For now, I only have one, so we'll leave that alone. But once you select the accordion list, go ahead and click this little blue checkbox, and there you go. You've now created the interaction. And if you notice, once the interaction is built, there's this little arrow that appears from the button and points to the accordion list. This is to help you understand what interactions are taking place, what component or unit is starting the interaction, and then what unit is being affected by the interaction, just so you can kind of map out everything that's going on the canvas. We're going to do this one more time and then deploy the component. So here we're going to do the exact same process, but I'm going to build it out for the account. So I'm just going to choose account real quick. We're going to type in the account name, add that to the header. We'll have maybe the phone number. Sorry, not the account. We don't want the account. We want a contact. Contact would make more sense. So here we're going to choose the contact's full name. We'll add that to the header, and then we'll add something like the email and maybe the title to it, just for the sake of brevity. So we'll say one more item here, title, add that to the content. There we go. Now we're going to do the exact same thing and say add filter. We're going to say when the full name of the contact could potentially contain anything from the unit that's called text box, we want to update this record. Now, one thing I should point out is if you notice, the button, when clicked, only refreshes the top accordion list. So I'm going to give this accordion list down here at the bottom, I'm going to call this my contact list to be more specific. Okay, we're going to go back into the button, and we're going to edit the search lead list. And in here, if you notice at the bottom, we have the ability to add an additional component that we're going to refresh. So in here, I'm also going to choose contact list. And as I do this, I'm just going to say, we're going to change this to just a search feature, and we're going to update this. So now we're actually going to have two interactions that are coming from the button, if you notice that. One is going to the accordion for the lead, one is going to the accordion for the contact. Once you're done designing this, go ahead and save the record. And then we are going to deploy the component into Salesforce. So on the upper right-hand corner, there's a little deploy button. And it's going to say, are you sure you want to deploy the My Webinar component? Yes, we do. So let's go ahead and click deploy. And we're going to go ahead and deploy that out and then open it up in the Lightning App Builder. So this is just a quick glimpse of how you can create components, how some events work in terms of interacting between different modular units. Some of the upcoming things that you'll be able to do is take components from the App Exchange, use them inside of our studio, and add your own functionality to kind of take what exists and then customize it even further to meet your business needs. So once a deployment's complete, Let's go ahead and switch over to the Lightning App Builder. Now for the sake of time, I already have the My Webinar page built. So we're going to open this up. I just open it, click Edit, and this will take us into the Lightning App Builder, where I already have some of the basic components on the page that you saw earlier at the very beginning. And inside of the Lightning App Builder, if you'll notice for the desktop, they have a lot of components that are not available to the mobile environment. So it's pretty nifty there. And if you notice here in the middle, we have the custom components. These are the components that we've built out or that you've built out yourself using raw code, and here's where they pop up. So there's the My Webinar component that we just built. The to-do list is a custom component that we have built, and if you notice, that's over here on the custom list as well. So there's that to-do list. What I'd like to do is select this area where the tabs are. On the right-hand side of the App Builder, I'm going to click Add Tab, and we're going to call this one, we're going to give it a custom name and call it the Webinar tab. Nothing too fancy, just the Webinar tab. And as we change over to the Webinar tab, I'm then going to drop the My Webinar component right inside of there. And so as we look at that, there's the My Webinar component that we just got done building. So we have the name, the type here, we have the lead with the name and the company name, and then we have the contact, which just has the name there. So once we're done doing this, we're going to go ahead and save this, and then normally you would click activation. For those of you who've never done this before, normally you would activate the page. And what the activation is going to do is allow you to specify whether you're going to override the object's kind of view screen, if you will. So in my case, I have this page assigned to the lead object. So it's asking if I want to make this My Webinar page the active page for the lead object. And I do, so it's checked. If you ever want to disable that, you simply come in here, go into activation, and uncheck this, and it will go back to the standard Lightning UI. So now that that's done, let's go ahead and refresh this screen here, and let's see if the component changes took place. So here, if you notice, we now have a third tab called Webinar tab, and this Webinar tab, if I click it, is going to have our webinar component. And in here, if I begin to type something like John, if you notice, this list does not dynamically search. That's not what we set up and configured. However, if I click search, then it's going to refresh the lead list and refresh the contact list to show us John Bond, who is a contact, and John Smith, who I guess John Smith is the contact and John Bond was the lead. So as you can see, we pulled record from both objects in a single location. So it can be fairly simple to understand how to build a Lightning component, but if you've never gone down that path, I would definitely recommend going and doing a bit of research on how Lightning components are structured, really understanding the event system that's going to be put in place to help you understand how to communicate with other components and create some of this dynamic interaction that you need. But for that, we are coming up on the 30-minute mark, so what I wanted to do was maybe open this back up for some Q&A where we could really talk about what's going on, what's happening inside of Lightning if you want, and we'll just kind of open up the floor for the next couple of minutes. But at this point in time, we are going to go ahead and wrap up the webinar, so thanks so much for joining. I hope that you're able to get a quick glimpse of, number one, how to customize Lightning if you've never done that before, but also a good idea of what it might look like to have some custom Lightning components inside of your environment as you begin doing some of those customizations moving forward. So thanks so much for joining, and I'll be here for the next 5 or 10 minutes or so, so if you have questions, stick around. We'll go ahead and get those answered. Have a great day.